Economist.
Don Tapscott is the co-author of Macroeconomics, a book that argues that every institution in society needs to be upgraded to take account of the dramatic changes wrought by the internet revolution and the potential it has for mass collaboration. We wanted to know more about where this Wikinomics movement is going, so we had him in for tea. Don Tapscott, thanks for having tea with The Economist. First question, what is Wikinomics?
Well, Wikinomics is really the theory and practice of collaborative innovation, or mass collaboration, meaning that the internet is not about websites or eyeballs or stickiness or clicks or page views. It's a global communication platform that radically drops collaboration costs. And that means that peers can now come together and create value. If you can create an encyclopedia with 1 million people, it's 10 times bigger than Britannica and 190 languages, but the quality is roughly the same according to the big study that's been done. What else could you create? Could you create a computer operating system that way? Well, it turns out Linux is the dominant operating system in the world for medium and large computers. No one owns it, and Linux has some big customers like China. So you can also create a physical good, like a motorcycle. The Chinese motorcycle industry is dozens of little companies that cooperate together. They meet in tea houses and on the internet. There's no OEM pulling all the strings. So the idea of Wikinomics is that people can now collaborate, businesses can collaborate in new ways, and that means that every organization, every firm needs to figure out a strategy on how to embrace this new phenomenon.
Now, you first wrote about this phenomena 4 years ago when you published Wikinomics, and now you have this new book called Macroeconomics. So what's the difference between Wikinomics and Macroeconomics?
Well, what happened in the interim is that we saw the global financial meltdown and the Great Recession. And it occurred to us that this is so deep and it's so systemic that this is not just some kind of slump, that we're in a turning point in history where the internet has finally come of age, and at the same time, arguably, many of the institutions of the industrial economy have run out of gas. They've taken us forward to a certain point, but they can no longer do so. And whether it's newspapers that are collapsing, or the music industry that's going under, or our systems for global problem solving, or government, or our healthcare systems, our models of democracy, the financial services industry needs a lot more than regulation. It needs a whole new modus operandi. These are all institutions that arguably are stalled and in various stages of atrophy or even failure.
So which businesses do you think are understanding what needs to be done?
Well, in every industry, there are sparkling new initiatives that are underway, and that's what we talk about in macroeconomics. So take something like the sclerotic auto industry, typified by General Motors, and of course a company that almost went bankrupt and disappeared if it wasn't for government bailouts. Well, we've now got new models of how automobiles are manufactured, like we talk about Local Motors, a company in the United States set up by an Iraq war vet named Jay Rogers. And he decided, fighting in Iraq, that one of the reasons he was there is to protect this old model of energy and oil. So he decided to set up a company. He's got 5,000 designers for automobiles, but they're all on the web and they don't work for him. Rather than a 3 million square foot plant, he's got local plants in 30 locations in the United States. And he's hiring local people, and he's building local cars for the needs of that specific marketplace. Is this something that could scale? Well, now he's got a whole bunch of competitors. So you can see the contours of a very different approach to something like essential to the economy as manufacturing cars that are emerging.
Now, is crowdsourcing part of Wikinomics?
Well, the idea of the crowd, that companies can get talent outside of their boundaries, is a good one. But typically it's not really a crowd. Procter & Gamble's looking for a molecule that'll take red wine off a shirt. They have 9,000 chemists inside their boundaries, and they have 1 million outside that they can now get to. But the people out there are not really a crowd. They're individual chemists. And Procter & Gamble uses what we call an idea agora, a Roman or Greek agora, for ideas. These are marketplaces for uniquely qualified minds.
And so they have a computer an internet network where people come in and
That's right.
look at it.
So the Innocentive network has hundreds of thousands of chemists in the network. So Procter & Gamble reaches out to them and says, we're looking for a molecule with these characteristics. And sure enough, there's a retired chemist in London or a grad student in Taipei comes up with a molecule. P&G pays them a few $100,000, and P&G has a great new product. So in every industry, we're starting to understand that talent is not just inside our boundaries. As the expression goes, your most precious asset goes out the elevator every night. No, talent can be outside. The world can be your HR department, given the fact that the web radically drops transaction and collaboration costs.
So has this made a big difference at a company like Procter & Gamble?
It sure has. 50% of all of their innovation comes from outside the company, and Procter & Gamble's doing well. Lots of problems, like how do you get the internal people to want to find the solution outside because of the not invented here syndrome, right, NIH. At Procter & Gamble, they have changed the compensation system so that scientists get compensated for innovation rather than that they came up with it. And at P&G, they call it the PFE syndrome, proudly found elsewhere.
So presumably this is good for startups as well.
Absolutely. Little companies can have all the capability of big companies now without the main liabilities, deadening bureaucracy, legacy cultures and processes and technology and attitudes and so on. So the internet is a factor leveling the playing field.
So you've written about all these fascinating things that are going on in Wikinomics. Do you feel that they're still on the fringe, or they're like really the mainstream ideas now for the industries and institutions that you're looking at? I mean, if we were on a scale of 1 to 10, I mean, how far are we along the adoption process for Wikinomics?
I think the speed of change is accelerating. When you think about the book Wikinomics, was written almost 4 years ago. It was fairly radical at the time, and now it's fairly commonplace that companies do the kinds of things that we argued for in the book. And I'm convinced that we'll look back in a decade or two on this period right now, and we'll think that it was much more than the Great Recession. It was a turning point where we started to understand that tinkering with old models and old institutions is really inappropriate. We have this amazing contrast in society between stagnation and atrophy and failure on the one hand, and sparkling new initiatives that are based on a whole new open model on the other. So I think the time has come for these ideas, that many of our ideas about moving to a new networked age were ideas in waiting, and they were waiting for the kinds of changes that are happening today.
So you've talked about the positive change that can be driven by Wikinomics, but is there also a dark side?
Well, there absolutely is, and we talk about this in the book quite a bit. What's happening is with the traditional media, the printing press, and then later the broadcast media, they were one way, and they were one to many. They were centralized, and they carried the values of their owners or advertisers. The new media is the antithesis. It's highly distributed. It's not one to many. It's one to one or many to many. And it has this awesome neutrality. It will be what we want it to be. And if we want it to be a global platform to solve the problem of climate change or to cure diseases, or to educate our population, or to create a more open model of democracy, then it will be that. If we want it to be a platform to organize to eliminate public education in the United States, as some some people in the Tea Party would argue, then that's what it'll be as well. In fact, it's used by evil people to organize terrorist acts.
But yet you're fundamentally optimistic, are you, that on balance it will come out as a positive? Or I mean, that seems to be the thrust of everything that you're saying.
Yeah, overall, I have great hope. But to me, the future is not something to be predicted, it's something to be achieved. And we each need to get involved.
Well, Don Tapscott, thank you very much for having tea with The Economist.
My pleasure.
That was Don Tapscott, co-author of Macroeconomics. He is basically positive about the potential for Wikinomics to change the world, but he is also aware that there are dangers, that Wikinomics could lead to balkanization, to society fracturing. There's nothing inevitable about the direction that we as a society go. It's about the choices that we, the people, make.